Picture this. America's national debt is piling up like an avalanche poised to bury our economic future. And according to a top expert, the most probable way out is a brutal dose of austerity sparked by a financial meltdown. It's a grim prediction that demands our attention. And as we dive in, you'll see why it's not just doom and gloom. It's a wake-up call for how we might navigate the storm ahead. Jeffrey Frankel, a renowned Harvard professor and former advisor to President Bill Clinton's Council of Economic Advisors, paints a stark picture in his recent Project Syndicate op-ed. He argues that the U.S. government's publicly held debt has already ballooned to 99% of our gross domestic product, GDP. That's the total value of all goods and services produced in the country, and it's projected to climb to a whopping 107% by 2029, surpassing even the peak we saw after World War II. To put this in perspective, imagine your family owing more in debts than your entire household income for the year. It's unsustainable and growing. Right now, just paying the interest on this debt costs over $11 billion every single week, which accounts for about 15% of all federal spending for the current budget year. That's money that could be going towards schools, roads, or social programs instead of keeping the debt monster at bay. Frankel outlines several potential paths to address this looming crisis, including boosting economic growth, dropping interest rates, outright defaulting on loans, letting inflation erode the debt's value, using financial repression, essentially government tricks to keep borrowing costs artificially low, or embracing fiscal austerity. Fiscal austerity, for those new to the term, basically means slashing government spending drastically to cut the deficit. Think of it as a severe diet for the nation's budget, where we forego luxuries to pay off debts. Among these options, faster economic growth sounds the most appealing, right? It would naturally help the debt shrink as a share of GDP. But Frankel warns that this rescue isn't on the horizon. Our workforce is shrinking due to aging populations and lower birth rates. And while artificial intelligence, AI, promises to supercharge productivity, like how robots might streamline manufacturing jobs, it won't grow the economy enough to tame the debt beast single-handedly. For example, AI could help a factory produce more widgets faster, boosting output, but it can't magically create more workers or consumers to buy those widgets. And this is the part most people miss. The era of ultra-low interest rates that fueled easy borrowing in the past was a one-off fluke tied to global conditions that aren't repeating. As for defaulting, outright refusing to pay back what we owe, that's a non-starter. It would shatter trust in U.S. Treasury bonds, long seen as the world's safest investment, especially after recent shocks like President Trump's tariff policies, which rattle markets and raise doubts about stability. Relying on inflation to quietly reduce the debt's real value? That's just as risky as defaulting, because it erodes savings and purchasing power for everyday people, like how a sudden price hike on groceries shrinks your wallet. Financial repression, where the government coerces banks into buying bonds at below-market rates, sounds sneaky and unfair. It'd force institutions to invest in our debt, even if it's not profitable for them, potentially stifling private lending and economic vitality. So what's left on the table? Severe fiscal austerity, Frankel declares. To get our debt on a stable path, we need to eliminate nearly all defense spending or cut almost all non-defense discretionary outlays. Those are programs like education, infrastructure, and environmental initiatives that aren't mandatory. Imagine stripping down the military budget to bare bones or axing funding for parks and research grants. It's a radical overhaul that would demand sacrifices from every corner of society. But here's where it gets controversial. This painful fix probably won't happen until a full-blown fiscal crisis hits, like a market panic that spikes borrowing costs and forces action. The longer we delay, the harsher the medicine will be. Think of it as procrastinating on a root canal until the infection spreads. Politically, it's an uphill battle. Democrats, often champions of social programs, are unlikely to gut their priorities, while Republicans might seize any fiscal wiggle room for tax reductions, which could widen the deficit further. Frankel predicts austerity will arrive eventually, but only after the unforeseeable trigger of a calamity. This outlook aligns with insights from Oxford economics, which foresees the insolvency of Social Security and Medicare trust funds by 2034 as a potential spark for change. These funds, set aside for retirement and health care, would run dry, prompting lawmakers to tap into general government revenues, money earmarked for other needs like defense or debt payments. But Oxford's lead U.S. economist, Bernard Yaris, cautions that this move could backfire spectacularly. Bond markets, sensitive to signs of fiscal weakness, might react negatively, viewing it as lawmakers avoiding tough reforms. A sharp spike in long-term bond yields could then pressure Congress into action, much like how a credit card company raises rates when you're late on payments, forcing you to budget more strictly. In essence, we're staring down a crossroads where economic reality might clash with political preferences, potentially leading to a contentious debate on fairness and priorities. Some might argue that austerity is a necessary evil, a fair way to reset our fiscal house, while others could counter that it unfairly burdens the vulnerable, suggesting alternatives like targeted tax hikes on the wealthy instead. What do you think? Is severe austerity the unavoidable path? Or are there smarter ways to dodge this crisis? Do you believe markets will truly force reform? Or could political will prevail? Share your thoughts and join the conversation in the comments. Let's explore this together.